You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 226. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Are you ready to have a chat about confidence? I know I am, and I'm so glad that you've joined me here this week for what I feel like is a bit of a heart-to-heart. This is kind of like an intimate conversation, a bit of a pep talk even, because confidence is one of those topics that continues to come up regularly in my coaching practice. And it's not just lawyers who are really junior, just starting out, or law students making that transition from law school to law firm. I see it at all levels of lawyering and leadership. And so I'd love for us to take some time to dive into this topic, have a discussion about it, because what I often see is that a lack of confidence, a lack of self-confidence, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, whatever it is that you would want to call it, can be a barrier to you reaching your fullest potential, to making decisions that you want to make. And I want to help you with that by giving you some tools, some suggestions, some ideas about how to think about confidence and how to build your confidence. So today's podcast episode is all about learning the skill of confidence, of how to be more confident, really. Now, to get yourself in the mindset of why this matters to you, or where you might be struggling personally with a lack of confidence or self-doubt or imposter syndrome, I'm going to invite you to consider the last time where maybe you didn't do something, or maybe you did do something because of a lack of confidence or a feeling of self-doubt. So this could be something that's fairly discreet and situational. Sometimes you'll be invited to a networking event and you don't want to disappoint somebody, so you say yes to that event, knowing full well that you don't really want to do it. But the reason that you're not saying no is because you feel a lack of confidence, perhaps, about how you would manage the situation if that person were to be upset with you. Or maybe you say yes to a work assignment for the same reasons, right? It's that idea of saying yes when what you really want is to not say yes to the thing, but there's a self-doubt, there's a confidence block that's keeping you from doing that. Sometimes it shows up in not questioning a person who's in a position of authority, whether that's a client or a more senior lawyer that you work with. They may say something, and I've had this happen to me before. I've had this happen with clients that I've worked with, where you know the answer, and yet somebody who is either truly in a position of authority or who has assumed a position of authority within the conversation says the opposite. And so instead of sticking to your guns, you might not, or you might not raise your question in the first place because you assume that that person, because they are the authority, is correct and that you're not. And so that can be an example of where confidence is keeping you from speaking up, from clarifying or standing your ground. It can also be that you dismiss ideas before really giving them a chance to come to fruition. So you might have a really brilliant idea about something you can do on a file or a networking strategy or an event that you could plan. And instead of giving life to that idea, you might talk yourself out of it before it ever comes to see the light of day or before it ever becomes a conversation with another person. So just notice what situations, what discrete things might be happening, maybe things that happened recently or maybe something that's on your mind right now, where you're feeling that sense of maybe it's doubt, maybe it's lack of confidence, and it's holding you back, or it's making you do things that you actually don't want to do, but you're scared about what would happen if you were to say no. Now, bigger picture, is also where I see confidence being problematic. And most often in my coaching practice, this involves some sort of a career-related question, often around making a transition. A typical question or a typical situation where you may feel stuck, right? It might be you're in the wrong job and you don't know if you want to stay. You have things about the job that you do like, and every once in a while you're reminded of that. Something good happens, and then you feel like, yeah, no, I do want to be here. And then you're following that wonderful event by 2 or 3 weeks of misery. You feel like you're in the wrong place. You're not feeling aligned, etc. And so you continue to come back to this question of, should I stay here or go? It could be your job. It could be your practice area. It could be the legal profession altogether. I mean, it shows up in all different ways, but there's a stuckness there, which often at the root of it is caused by a lack of confidence. It's a lack of confidence in your choice to move in the first place. You might be second guessing yourself, and maybe also a lack of confidence that if and when you do make that choice, that you're going to be able to make things work out. So as we're going through the episode today, as we're having this heart-to-heart conversation, I invite you to think about where in your practice, where in your life you might feel like you're playing small, you're choosing not to do things or to do things that they're not in line with a confident choice. You're making that decision for some other reason. Maybe it's that feeling of doubt that it's not going to work out. And think about how what we're talking about today applies to you. So with that, I would love to dive in a little bit and talk more about what we're talking about with confidence. What is it? Why is it a problem? And what I've noticed in my coaching practice and before that as a lawyer in my career, it is that I think that women lawyers in particular struggle with a lack of confidence. And I experienced this myself as a new lawyer. I think many lawyers do when you first start out and everything is new and you're doing things that feel very high pressure. You're going to court for the first time. You're handed files that have significant liability and you're responsible for helping other people solve their problems. Maybe you're in an environment that is new to you. I know for me, when I started out as a lawyer, I'd never worked in an office before. I'd worked in restaurants, I'd worked in airports and bakeries and some offices, some university offices, but nothing like a law firm. And so when you're first starting out and everything's brand new to you, then of course it makes sense that you're not going to feel all that much. You're not going to feel that comfort of having been there. There's a lot of new, there's a lot of discomfort, there's a lot of growth. And so for a lot of lawyers, that can lead to feelings of being an imposter, right? Do you truly belong? And also doubting your capabilities. Do I have what it takes to make it here? So it's totally normal. Like I was saying, I've experienced myself and I've seen it with so many other people, and particularly after becoming a coach, because my conversations with lawyers tend to be very deep, heart to heart. I'm hearing what's really going on behind the scenes. And for so many lawyers, whether they're just starting out or they're really experienced and have lots of experience and knowledge, there are going to be situations where that lack of confidence comes up. So I see it often in women. I would say that most of the time this comes up for me in my practice. It's with women lawyers. And I've got a few theories as to why that is. And I don't think any of them would come as a surprise to anybody listening. But I do think that the conditioning that we have for women socially tends to emphasize things like being a certain way, being nice, being feminine, being helpful, being useful, being perfect. There's a lot of pressure on women, I think, to be a certain way. I think that society at large has no problem weighing in on very personal matters for women. I think the way that we judge women, we judge their appearance, we judge their bodies, it's fairly common. It's fairly, I want to say, pervasive in society to the point that we have just been brought up in a sense in a society, in a culture where people think it's okay to deliver their opinions. And as a result, I think sometimes we can feel like those opinions really matter. We can feel like your personal life is not just you, right? It's not just you and your thoughts. You're also internalizing all of these messages that you've heard over the years from your family, from society, from past teachers and professors and bosses and colleagues and friends. And so I think people can be quite judgmental of women about a certain number of things. And then you carry that into the workplace, and it can be hard to step away from that. You might feel like maybe you're more sensitive, or that, there's this sense of having to be a certain way. And if there's a gap, then that can create a feeling of self-doubt or lack of confidence. So maybe that's how you feel, maybe not. Maybe this is something that doesn't really apply to you, but I know for a lot of us, myself included, that that's kind of my starting point. I feel like I've got a lot of should statements running through my mind as a woman, as a professional, as a parent even, that my children should behave a certain way, or I should do certain things as a parent. A lot of that is very deeply ingrained. And so part of today's exercise is raising awareness about that for you, for me, for all of us. And in our quest for greater confidence, that sense of self-trust, that sense of self-confidence, the ability to make difficult decisions, even when we feel that sense of self-doubt, I think it's important for us to all have awareness about some of the messaging that's going on in the background that may feed into this challenge of feeling confident. So when we think about what it is, that lack of confidence, the way that I am thinking about it for today's discussion is that there's a gap there. There's a gap in terms of your confidence. And that gap might be a gap between where you think you should be and where you actually are. So you might think that you should be somewhere else, somewhere better, somewhere further ahead. And that might be based on your perception that others are ahead of you, that they know more than you, that they're more experienced than you. And it might also be based on maybe an unrealistic expectation that you've set just through whatever sources of information that you have about where you should be relative to you are. And this can contribute to that feeling of being an imposter. So, for example, if you think about yourself in your workplace, you might look at your colleagues and think, well, they're so much better than me. They went to a better law school than I did, or they had better grades. And I see that play out years later, and, they've got stronger connections than me, or they're faster than me. Maybe you're doing a research project, or you're going to court and you're thinking, well, so-and-so down the hallway would do this faster and better. So you may have this unrealistic expectation about where you should be. Maybe you're a certain level call, you're a 3-year call or a 10-year call, and you think someone at my level should already know how to do this. So the fact that I can't do this is a reflection on me. It's a poor reflection. So there's this gap in terms of where you think you should be, right? And again, this is where you think you should be. It's not necessarily an objective measure of where you should be. It's your thoughts about that and where you actually are. And then sometimes there's a gap that's caused more in the sense of you're not necessarily seeing where you are. And it makes sense because you are experiencing your growth on a day-to-day basis, and you may not always see it. It might not catch up with you the same way as it would for others. And if you're around people who see you every single day, it might not catch up with them either. And a really clear example of this is when you see people and their children, because children grow a lot and they grow quickly. But to a parent, the day-to-day increments are imperceptible, right? It's only when you see someone else's children that you go, wow, actually, holy smokes, like your son has shot up by at least 6 inches since the last time I saw you. And then you look at your own kid and you're like, wow, actually they have too, but you don't see it. And the same is true of your professional growth. You may not even realize how much you've accomplished over the past year, 2 years, even over the past 6 months. Things change rapidly, but because you're in it, because you're the person who's changing, you may not see it. And so you may have this self-perception of a person who has capabilities at limit A, when in fact you're far beyond that, but you just don't see it yet. And so what I want us to be thinking about is how to close that gap, that perception of where you think you should be versus the perception of where you think you are. And there might be some wiggle room, especially when we're talking about perception. Now, there are times where you'll have objective criteria that you're expected to meet. And that is a reality of learning any skill. You want to be developing your skills in a way that aligns with maybe objective measures that are set by your firm or organization, or where you think you should be at your level of call. You might map that out and say, okay, this year, these are the skills I want to develop, etc. So I'm not saying that, you can think your way to having the skills that you think you should have. I think there's real value in setting objective criteria for yourself and then following a path that helps you develop those skills. But what I am focused on here is this perception that you should be further ahead than you are. That, I think, is something that we can certainly work on. I love the idea that you're exactly where you should be, and that can be a mantra that you tell yourself, I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm exactly where I should be. So that is one area or one way of thinking about that. Now, in terms of confidence, another gap that occurred to me while I was preparing for today was the gap between what you want to do and what you think you should do. And this comes up again. I used the example of a transition a few minutes ago. It's the same thing. I think a lot of lawyers struggle with the idea that you are in a role at a law firm or some other organization that feels really steady. It feels like what you trained for. It feels like a real and substantial and important job. And you feel like you should do that it's the right thing. It's what your parents want. It's what people expect of you. It's what you've been doing for the past several years. You've got colleagues who want you there. You've got clients who depend on you. And yet there might be a part of you that is just telling you that this is not right. You want something different. Maybe you want something different in the practice of law, right? You want something different about your day-to-day, the way that you practice. It could be that you want something different that's not even in law. And you're potentially quieting that voice because it's not what you think you should do, right? It's what you want, but it's not what you should do. And that's where I see a lot of lawyers really, really struggling. And that, again, in my view, comes back to confidence. Do you have the confidence to choose that thing that you actually want, which isn't the thing that you think you should want? Again, maybe it's a parallel to the idea you think you should be a certain way, or you should be at a certain level. You think you should want this certain job, that you should be committed to it, etc. And yet what you want is different. So that can be problematic as well. Do you have the confidence to go against the grain? Do you have the confidence to take that leap of faith and step out into the unknown and see what happens? It's that gap. We're talking about that gap today in terms of the thing that is keeping you from doing the thing that you want to be doing, or from advancing in the way that you want to be advancing. When you carry this feeling of that gap, that lack of confidence, the self-doubt, you might feel like you don't belong. Everybody else is faster, smarter, further ahead than you, and you're somehow behind. So you might feel like you're not one of them, you're not like them, you don't measure up. You might feel like you're on the wrong path. And as a result, you might feel anxious, nervous, out of place. You might feel like you're kind of worried about pursuing the unknown, and you can shy away from taking risks. So those might be risks in terms of projects that you take on or big decisions that you make. It may also be that you second guess yourself. So maybe you do make a decision, but then you spend a lot of time ruminating over that decision. And you might find that you slow your growth. And sometimes you might even find that you do make headway, you make progress, you achieve a new milestone, but then you kind of undo that, right? It's like you start to self-sabotage, you play down your success. Maybe you, find yourself making weird mistakes, and all of a sudden you're kind of back to where you started. If that goes on over time, then you might even start to self-identify as a person who is not confident, a person who lacks confidence. And that can be internalized, right? If you feel that way, if you believe that about yourself, you might not even do it consciously, but unconsciously, you might speak in a certain way that doesn't convey confidence. You might hold your body in a certain way that doesn't convey confidence. And you may be making decisions that reflect the self-concept of somebody who is not confident. And so if that's something that you can relate to, or if you find that there are areas in your life where you do feel this lack of confidence, right? And I don't think that confidence is something that you will probably have uniformly experienced across your life span or your life areas. When I was thinking about confidence, and, we'll get into it a little bit more, how, whether you identify as a confident person, you might feel really confident in one area of your life and a total lack of confidence in another area of your life. And I think that's normal. I think that's to be expected. And what we really want to focus on is, okay, where you do feel confident, what's going on there? What are you thinking? What are you doing? How can we capture that feeling and move it to another area of your life? We talked about this idea, or in the title, I talked about confidence being a learnable and transferable skill. So today we really want to focus on learning learning the skill of developing confidence and also that transferable aspect of it. Even just thinking about confidence on its own, that once you see where you're confident and how you can grow that confidence, you can transfer that skill into other areas of your life. And also from the perspective of employment, I often get asked about transferable skills. I'm a lawyer. What are my transferable skills? Well, of course, writing, advocacy, digesting information, managing client relationships. I mean, there's all sorts of typical transferable skills that we think about because they show up on a resume. That sense of confidence, that ability to build and feel confident, that is a transferable skill. When you learn to develop that, you get to take that to any job that you go to in the future, any practice that you start, any professional work that you do. So it is transferable in the sense that you can learn how you personally develop confidence and transfer it to other parts of your life. And as a marketable skill, your confidence is transferable from place to place. Let's focus now on how to. Just because you, let's say, identify as somebody who is not particularly confident, or maybe there's an area of your life where you feel that lack of confidence, what can you do about it? And the good news is that confidence is not something that you are stuck with. Just because you are not necessarily disposed to be that extremely confident type of person. And we all know people who are. We all know people who seem to have this innate sense of confidence. I know for myself, I have often been drawn to people who have a lot of confidence because I myself don't necessarily feel all that confident. So I can think of friends that I had in elementary school, people I was drawn to in law school or professionally even, where I was really taken in by the confidence they had in themselves. And for some people, even arrogance or confidence to a flaw. Now, since I have matured, I'm now a 48-year-old woman and I've got professional experience under my belt. I'm a mother, a wife, and a friend and daughter. And, I play a lot of roles. I've had to do a number of things. So, I've developed skills and in areas, there are ways I've been naturally confident. I've always been a good speller. So I feel like I can spell really well. I've been a good student. So I know I can take exams. I feel like a confident traveler. At 19 years of age, I went on my own to Switzerland to be an au pair, and I didn't think twice about it. I'd gone to the university campus. This is back in the day when there were physical job boards, not everything online. I went to a physical job board. I saw a posting for a nanny in Switzerland. I thought, you know what? I kind of want to take a gap here. This looks like a great opportunity. Got the job, and off I was, right? I didn't really second guess that decision. It was a tough, it was tough being on your own for a year at that age in a foreign country, foreign language, all that. It was tough, but I was confident. I was confident in my ability to say, you know what, this is something that I want to do. Whereas in other situations, I don't necessarily have that same level of confidence. And so I've had to really be proactive in building that sense of confidence. So for example, as a new coach, I had to get used to the idea of holding a conversation, of holding space, of being the person who's directing a conversation with a client, where I'm keeping the flow, where I'm making sure the client is being served and getting what they need from that conversation. And there's an art to that. There's an art and a science. And so at the very beginning, I found that awkward. I had to assume a different role in a coaching conversation relative to any other conversation I'd had previously. And over time, that confidence has grown. Same with speaking. The first time I sat down to record a podcast episode, I was terrified. And am I still terrified? Sometimes. Sometimes it's harder to do than others. Certain speaking engagements I'll find more challenging than others, but I've also chosen to do this. I've chosen to build my confidence in this area for lots of reasons, personal and professional. And so even though I can sense there's perhaps self-doubt or I need to work on confidence in certain things that I take on, I choose that on purpose. And so what I'm saying here is that confidence may be something that comes naturally to you in certain areas and not in other areas. And if you find that maybe you're not feeling that confident, it's not necessarily something that you're stuck with, that it is learnable and that you can apply yourself and become more confident as a result. So in terms of what you might think of when it comes to confidence is, number one, to know that you're not alone. If you are feeling a lack of confidence, you're in very good company. As I mentioned earlier, I've spoken to lawyers at all levels. And at all levels, even the most confident seeming lawyers and the lawyers who are the most accomplished, the ones who you would assume never feel a moment of lack of confidence. Okay, all but one. I'm thinking of one person who delivered a speech who declared to the room that she had never felt imposter syndrome. So maybe that's one person that I've spoken to or I've sort of witnessed in in my experience working with lawyers or speaking with lawyers, being around lawyers. But otherwise, I've seen lawyers at all stages at some point have a bit of a questioning of their ability, of their confidence. So for example, I can think of a really senior lawyer that didn't get the outcome they wanted on a case, and that really kind of got under their skin. And I was surprised because I didn't think that someone of that level would feel that way. And yet there it was right in front of me. I've spoken with really highly successful lawyers who are looking to make a transition later in their career and having that sense of self-doubt, can I make this work? If I go out on my own, will this business even fly? And of course, at the more junior levels, right? When everything is brand new and you're feeling that sense of, is this work that I can do? Am I cut out for this? Am I capable? Like I've got everything, is the first time I'm doing it. It's hard. It's time consuming. Do I have what it takes? So it happens at all levels. So if you feel this way, you are not alone. So I really do want to normalize it because we don't often talk about these things. At least as far as I'm concerned, we don't talk about it often enough. So it's normal. And what I'd also love for you to think about is that the reason, or at least one of the reasons why you may feel a lack of confidence is because you're stretching yourself. We rarely feel that sense of self-doubt or lack of confidence if we've done something before, right? It's like, okay, well, I've written these reports to the client a million times. I could do them in my sleep. Maybe you go to court so often that you know exactly what to do every single time. It's no longer something that terrifies you the way it did the first time you went to court, for example, or conversations with opposing counsel. Maybe at the beginning that was something that really made you feel nervous. And now you know exactly how you approach those conversations. You've got a strategy. You feel like you could do that quite easily. And so the point here, of course, is that as you're stretching yourself, as you're taking on new things, as you're doing things you haven't done before, it's normal to feel that sense of, can I do this? And that's a good thing. The fact that you're stretching yourself is a good thing. It means you're growing. It means you're learning. And so if you do have that twinge of fear, maybe that's something that we can get excited about because it means we're learning. So there's a model that I would like to offer you when thinking about confidence that will give you kind of a step-by-step. And that is a 4-stage model. It was one that I learned from a coach named Dan Sullivan. He's a Canadian coach. He talks about the 4 C's of confidence. And I think it's a really useful frame because as I describe it, you'll probably see how it applies to various stages of your life, things that you've learned. And it's one that if you can use this frame, it will just make that process, that feeling of developing confidence feel more tangible, more doable. So the 4 C's are commitment, courage, competence, and confidence. And what he says is that you start with that commitment, the commitment to do something. That might be the commitment to make a really difficult decision. It might be the commitment to take on a case that seems really problematic. It might be the commitment to having a difficult conversation, but it starts with that decision that you make to do the thing that maybe pushes you, that pulls you outside of your comfort zone. Next comes courage. The commitment itself, it can be somewhat challenging. I find a commitment is challenging if you put skin in the game right away, right? If you're making a decision to make a purchase, right? I talked about making that commitment. I think my last sort of big feeling of, oh, am I really doing this was when my daughter and I made that trip to France, right? And my husband too, he joined for part of it, but I was buying tickets for my daughter and me, and I pressed the pay button. And that to me felt kind of exhilarating. That was my action that supported the commitment. So the commitment itself, especially when supported by an action where you put skin in the game, that really gets the ball rolling and that moves you into courage. And what Dan Sullivan says about courage, and I completely agree, is that it feels gross and terrible. So that's that feeling of unease. Maybe it's that knot in the pit of your stomach. It's that swirling thoughts in your head about all the things that are going to go wrong, right? If you decide you're going to take on a file, you might be thinking about, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? There's a huge trial at the end of it. And I don't know if I've got what it takes for something like that. And who am I going to have on my team? I don't have enough team members right now, even to support the level of work that's involved with this. And so you start to think about all the problems, all the challenges, all the reasons why this is a bad idea, why it's not going to work, why you're going to fail, how it's going to be humiliating and everybody's going to see it, etc. That's when courage is required. And that's when it's going to feel hard. It's going to feel hard because you're doing something you haven't done before. You don't know what the outcome is going to be yet. And so you move into that phase of courage, and courage does not necessarily feel great. And that's okay. And that's when you move into the stage of competence. So if you take all of those thoughts, right? I mean, the courage stage can be really useful because if your mind starts offering up all these reasons why you're going to fail, and you take the time to write them down, you now have a pretty good sense of the hurdles you need to overcome to get to your goal, right? It's almost like having your goal blueprint mapped out ahead of you, and you have to solve for those things, which is great. Chances are you're also wanting to plan the goal, the outcome goal, and the steps to get there, but you're going to want to plan the hurdles. So, for example, when I used to go to court, I would have, especially if it was an application or a type of application I'd done before, yes, I'd have the main thrust of what I was there for, but I also had these backup plans. If the judge asks me X, I'll have the answer ready because I've seen this before and here's what I'm going to do. So it's almost like you've got your plan, you've got your goal, you've got the things you know you need to do to get there. And then because you've had that courage experience, that experience of, okay, what are all the potential setbacks? You also can anticipate them and solve for them. And as you move forward, as you start taking on or taking steps toward the thing you've chosen to do, you'll see that actually you can do it, especially if you're breaking things down into smaller steps. And that builds your competence. So we're not yet at confidence, but we're at competence. And as you feel more competent, then you will finally reach that level of confidence where it's that feeling of, okay, I know I can do this. Maybe you're right close to the end, or you've done this thing that was really hard 6 months ago, but now you've done it 10 times and now you're feeling really confident. And so the process isn't one and done. It's not overnight. It is that idea of commitment, courage, competence, and then confidence. So you can see how that's a cycle. And it's not limited to one situation. This is something that you repeat over time. So as you're growing, as you're taking on bigger challenges, that confidence cycle continues. So hopefully that framework gives you an idea of how you can reframe your approach to confidence, right? You don't need to feel confident to do the thing. The confidence will come in doing the thing. And the more you do this, right, the more you put yourself in testing situations and get forced almost to build your confidence, the more of that internal sense of self-trust strengthens because you now have really practiced that muscle of going from feeling self-doubt to feeling confident. And the more you exercise that meta skill, the more comfortable you are taking risks in the future. So that's kind of the main thing I wanted to say here in terms of the model. Here's what you can think of when it comes to building confidence. Now, it helps if you have a growth mindset. And growth mindset, you may have heard me speak about it before, is a concept that was coined by Carol Dweck. She's an American psychologist. She has written a book called Mindset, and there's so much great material about mindset. She's got a great TED Talk. And for the purposes of today, what I'd invite you to think about is that a growth mindset is to be contrasted against a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is the belief that things are a certain way, right? If you have a certain level of intelligence, that is your level of intelligence. Nothing can be done about it. You're stuck with that. And if you come across a problem, a math problem, a legal problem, and you don't know the answer, that's a sign that you lack intelligence. And this type of thinking can be really limiting. It can cause you to shy away from challenging problems because you see them as a reflection of what you don't know, as opposed to, for example, what you could learn. And if you go down that path, then you might find yourself playing small. And as a result, you kind of get fixed. You kind of get stuck. And this is often associated with perfectionistic thinking. You don't want to do something unless you can do it perfectly. And so you would rather stay doing things that you already know how to do instead of pushing yourself to grow and to learn. So that would be a fixed mindset. And you can compare that to a growth mindset where the underlying belief is that intelligence can be acquired through applied learning, through effort, through strategic actions. And so when you believe that, then if you have a problem, if you have a challenge, instead of seeing that problem or challenge as a reflection of how inadequate you are, you see that as an opportunity to get stronger. So same here with confidence. If we look at confidence and we see it as a learnable skill, right? It's an area where you can grow instead of having that fixed mindset. Well, I'm not a confident person. I'm not a confident speaker. I'm not confident in court. I'm not confident in leading a deal. Instead of thinking that way, we're going to be thinking of, well, I can develop my confidence. I can become a more confident speaker. I can become more confident as an advocate. And then you're more willing to take on these challenges because they are growth opportunities. These are the equivalent of lifting weights at the gym. The muscle that you will build as a result will be stronger than where you're starting. So that growth mindset is key. And if you want to think about how you could apply that, it's asking yourself when you are in a challenging situation, instead of saying something like, kind of going back to the idea that other people are further ahead of you, right? If I was that lawyer down the hall, I'd already have figured this out. Or I'm a X-year call, I can't believe I don't know this already. Instead of giving yourself that type of messaging, be very strategic in terms of the questions you ask yourself. It might be something that acknowledges where you are already. What skills do I have that make me the ideal person to solve this problem? What do I already know about this problem? Where have I seen a similar challenge and overcome it? What are some of the questions that will build you up? What are some of the transferable skills, if you will, that you've already developed that you could apply to this problem? And also, what can I gain? What skills will I grow? How will this make me stronger? What will be better when I'm finished with this project? So you want to ask yourself questions that are growth oriented as opposed to stating facts to yourself that are limiting and probably not even true. So that is the thing that I would love for you to consider here is your mindset. It's that growth mindset approach. So we've talked about this 4 C's model. You're going from commitment to courage to competence to confidence. You're adopting a growth mindset. And then I would love for you to focus on the things that are within your control. You can build your confidence by focusing on what you think. So we've talked a bit about that. What is the mindset that you're taking? And also focusing on how you feel and how you act. So for example, if you think about feelings, notice how you're feeling. How do you want to feel? You might think you want to feel confident, that you want to feel self-assured. What does that feeling, what does that like for you? And you might also notice as you go through your tasks, like what feels hot, what feels cold. So how do you want to feel? And then what would you need to think in order to feel that way, right? If you're thinking, okay, I want to feel committed toward taking action, that might mean telling yourself this is important. I've chosen to do this. This doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done. So think about how you feel and then how you want to talk to yourself to bring yourself to that feeling. And then finally, what actions are you taking or not taking? So you get to control the way that you're thinking. You get to control how you want to feel, how you choose to feel. Now, I get it. You're not always going to have full control over how you feel. There are days when you're going to wake up and you'll feel more anxious than others, or you're going to feel tired, or you're going to feel like you want to give up. And, we don't ask for those feelings, but we can reframe how we're thinking that can influence the way that you're feeling. So you might go for a walk, take a break, have a pep talk, whatever it happens to be. So we want to focus though on being proactive about how you feel. And then finally, action. What actions are you taking or what actions are you not taking that align with confidence? If you think about the example of, say, making a transition, going from one job to the next, lawyers who never really make a move, they decide, you know what, I actually want to stay. And sometimes that decision is informed by the fact that they've been able to make changes, internal changes in terms of how they approach their work, the way that they perceive their work, and also external changes. Maybe it's the quality of the work that they're doing, right? The substance and quality, maybe the way that they're working, maybe their role has shifted, the people they work with, etc. So you can make it work. And sometimes you might choose to stay because you're just not willing to take the risk to leave. And I've worked with clients who have decided that they want to leave a difficult situation, and they simply make the choice to exit without a safety net. And that to me is one of those signals of very solid confidence. You have the confidence that you are going to land on your feet. And that's what permits you to do that. So all I'm asking you to do here is to be thinking about what's within your control, your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And how are you choosing to think and feel and act that aligns with this sense of confidence? What would you do if you felt confident about whatever it is? What would you be doing, and what might you not be doing? It might be saying no to projects that you don't really want to take on. It might be setting boundaries with people that you otherwise feel like maybe you shy away from doing that because you're concerned about how they're going to feel. And then that brings us to the next idea. The next strategy is who you surround yourself with. And this really makes a big difference. I've noticed in my own life and in the lives of the lawyers that I've known professionally, as a coach, socially, etc. The culture that you work on can have a huge influence on your level of confidence. If you are surrounded by people who make you feel small, right? If they are nitpicking at your work, if they are difficult to work with, if they speak to you in a tone that doesn't feel respectful, if they are not respecting your boundaries, then it's not going to be surprising if you notice that your confidence starts to wane. I truly believe that our environment makes a big difference. Compare that to, for example, colleagues and mentors who believe in you, who say things to you that make you believe in yourself, who trust you, who give you projects, who tell you to run with it, who give you positive feedback. If you're in an environment like that, chances are you're going to feel a lot more confident. You're going to feel a willingness to take more risks. You're going to feel valued and appreciated. You're going to have a greater sense of self-worth and self-confidence. And so if you find that you're in an environment where your confidence is feeling undermined, then I do think you want to question whether you're in the right environment for you. And this can be really tricky because sometimes you're in a workplace setting and you're there because there's skills that you want to learn. And you know that you can learn these skills from lawyer A or lawyer B or boss A or boss B. And yet they're difficult in the sense that maybe they do some of these things. They undermine your work. Maybe they don't speak in the most respectful tone. They don't really respect your boundaries. Maybe they're highly critical in ways that kind of gets under your skin, right? Some people have a thicker skin than others. If you have thin skin, this can be problematic. So you need to ask yourself, right? You may be there to learn something, but you might ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it really worth it for you to be in that situation, in that environment? Are the things you're going to learn valuable enough to justify what it might be doing to your confidence? And only you can answer that question. But if you're struggling with a question like that, then I really encourage you to talk about it with somebody. Don't let this be a conversation that goes back and forth in your own mind without really thinking it through, because it may be that what you really need is to make a move. And maybe you're feeling less confident because your confidence has been worn down by whatever environment you're in. And so you might need a bit of a rebuild in order to develop that sense of self-confidence so that you can step into that cycle that we talked about, to make that commitment to do something different, whether it's conversations at the firm that you're in and you want to stay, but you want things to be different, or maybe it's a decision to leave and you want to start looking. So, you're going to enter onto that path, commitment, courage, competence, and confidence. And you might need some help getting started on that. So it could be a trusted colleague. It could be a mentor. It could be a coach. It could be a counselor. It could be a parent. It's somebody where you're going to have that earnest conversation with them and really weigh the pros and cons, right? Absolutely do that work on your own. If it helps to do a journal, to do a list, whatever. But in something like that, I'd also think getting help from other people is going to give you a perspective that you won't have by simply doing this on your own. Now, what I also think is really interesting about surrounding yourself with others is that it can give you a reflection, and I've kind of already alluded to this, about who you are. And it can also help you see in others what confidence can look like. And the example that came to mind for me in thinking about who you surround yourself with is the group program that I've been running for women lawyers, and also group programs that I've run in the past for lawyers. So these are coaching containers where there's more than one person in the room, and we're having really good, deep conversations about tricky things that happen. So lawyers will talk about challenges they're having. If they don't feel particularly confident dealing with a particular client or in a particular practice area, or they've got this problem and they want some help with it, or they just feel, even though they've got all the accreditations and certifications and experience and positive feedback, they still don't feel confident. The fact that we can have these conversations in a group environment is amazing, because you see by other people explaining what they feel, you see that you're not alone. And you also see that that person who is saying these words, what they're saying may not at all align with your perception of them. You might see them and maybe they're saying, I just don't think I'm very smart, or I just don't think I'm very good at this thing, or whatever. I don't think I'm personable, or whatever it is. And you might be staring at that person and thinking, well, of course you are. You're obviously brilliant. I've loved working with you. I can see how you're personable. And so you see how other people can think this, and it opens up your mind to this idea that, you know what? Like, even people who seem really confident, people who are really confident, they can also struggle with these things. And what's also really neat is that you can reflect to them, hey, you might think this about yourself, but actually here's how you come across to me. So that can be really impactful for them. It can also be really impactful for you, because then you start to think about, if that person is feeling that way, maybe there are areas where I'm feeling a sense of self-doubt, or I don't think I'm very good, but actually I'm not that bad, right? I'm actually pretty good at it. And that's reinforced, if you're in a container like that, by other people's opinions, where they actually say to you, hey, listen, like, you're actually come across as really strong in this, or the way that you've analyzed this problem makes a lot of sense to me. And so this idea of surrounding yourself with people who see you in your highest light, who are there to support you, who can give you feedback that shows you that, yes, you actually are perhaps further ahead than you thought, or maybe you've got skills you didn't even know you had. You might have someone tell you you're highly creative and you never thought of yourself as a creative person before. That can feel really good. Or they might tell you you're really organized, or you're really good at dealing with difficult people, or, I love the way that you did X. I mean, those are the people that you want to surround yourself with, especially if you're trying to build your confidence. So it's key. Think about who you're spending your time with. Who professionally are you spending your time with? Who are your colleagues? Who are your clients? Who are you reporting to? Who are your bosses, right? If you have a boss. And ask yourself if those are the relationships that are going to build your confidence or not. And if the answer is not, if these are people who are not going to help you build your confidence, or worse, they're going to effectively undermine it, then we need to start thinking about whether these are the right relationships for you. And if you want to move into a different environment, put an end to certain relationships, distance yourself from certain people, you may need to do that in order to move forward. That brings us to the last thing I wanted to share in terms of that ability to learn and grow your skills when it comes to confidence. And that is to be mindful of the set point. Now, the term set point is one that I learned from Gay Hendricks in his book, The Big Leap. And I love the idea of a set point because I think we all have them and we can all relate to them. The idea is this, that you have a certain set point, a certain self-concept, and it's almost like a thermostat in a room, right? If you think about a room having a thermostat and it's set at, let's say it's 18 degrees, if the room gets hotter than that, then the air conditioning will kick in and bring it back down to 18. If it's colder than that, the heater will kick in and bring it back to 18. So there's this set point that you have. And so when you start to grow, when your confidence starts to grow and you start taking on new challenges and you go through those 4 steps, and next thing you know, you feel more confident, this can cause a bit of a disruption because you may exceed your set point. And this can cause a disruption in others. I'm sure you've seen this. I know I have, where I might develop a new skill or a new level of confidence in one area. You might do the same and notice that there are some people who are really supportive. They are so happy and they're excited for you. And then there might be other people who are visibly perturbed. They might not say as much, but you can tell there's something off in their interactions with you. It's like something you've done bothers them. And so they might actually, maybe unconsciously, try to undermine your success in order to bring you to a level where they feel more comfortable. I wish this never happened, but it does happen, right? I think crabs, I've heard if crabs are trying to, if they all get collected in their in a tin bucket. I don't know why I'm thinking of a tin bucket. I'm thinking back to my childhood when we used to go crab fishing, right? So you get all the crabs and you stick them in a bucket with some water, and they're not happy to be in the bucket. And, if it's a tin bucket, I can still actually hear the sound of the claws against the tin, and it's like clank, clank. And what will happen is the crabs will try to climb out of the bucket. And so one crab will climb on top of another crab in order to get out, right? It's survival. And so it's kind of like that, right? Sometimes, I hate to say it, but there will be people, and maybe they're not your friends, maybe they're frenemies or people that you just happen to know or associate with because, I don't know, they are in the same space as you or the same circles as you. So we want to be mindful of those people. And it's easy to see when it's somebody else. Well, maybe not always. It's easier to see in somebody else, but sometimes that happens internally. So that's this idea of the set point, is that sometimes you don't feel comfortable at that new level of success. If you think about internet posting, right? I think that's an area where a lot of people feel shy about posting. And once you start doing it and you get desensitized, it's not a big deal, but it can feel really uncomfortable, especially if you start to get attention there. That might feel uncomfortable for you. And so you might then find, okay, well, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. And so you can actually start to self-sabotage, right? You might win a really difficult case. And instead of relishing in that feeling and the satisfaction of it, you might downplay it. Oh, it was nothing. Anybody could do it. We just got lucky. The judge was on our side, whatever. So we just want to be mindful that as you're building your confidence, you might hit up against these set points and notice them, right? If you notice you're hitting a set point and you feel uncomfortable, that's okay. We just want to label it. It's a set point. You're pushing up against a growing edge. That's okay. What I'd love to caution you against doing is self-sabotaging and pulling yourself down so that you feel more comfortable. And to think about this, what you might do is say, okay, if that was my current set point, like if that was the limit that I had based on who I was, I don't know, 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago, I've reached that new set point, and my goal now is to maintain that set point and make that my new floor. So that might mean pausing between bouts of growth. You grow and then you acclimatize. You grow and then you acclimatize. And so if you can do it that way, you're pacing yourself and you're just aware, right? That yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. It'll take a little bit of time to make that transition. And once you've settled at that new set point, then you can go again. I've offered a few ideas here then to help you develop that sense of confidence. I'm going to recap them so that you've got them fresh in your mind as we move forward with our discussion. And that in order are, number one, to look at confidence as that 4-stage cycle. And I've repeated it a few times. One last time, it's that idea that you're going to commit to an outcome. And that is going to bring up a lot of difficult feelings that you'll face with courage. Courage is seeing all the obstacles and choosing to go ahead with it anyways. That's when you'll develop the competence. So as you take steps, as you do things, as you interact and engage with the outside world, you're going to develop skills and a sense of competence. And from there, finally, you'll step into confidence, right? The confidence of having done it, having proved to yourself you can do it, and that confidence of knowing that you can do it again. You're then going to think about mindset, right? So the second offering was this idea of a growth mindset. So you're not seeing confidence as this thing that you're born with or you're not. Confidence itself is a skill that can be learned, and we are going to be focused on building that confidence. We're expanding your sense of self-confidence so that you can take on the things that you want to take on, so that you're not feeling so anxious, right? I think one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself in terms of developing that sense of confidence is not just in doing more, but in doing what you're currently doing, but without so much of the self-doubt and second guessing that comes along with that. That can free up so much mental bandwidth. And so even though you're doing the same work, you just feel so much lighter. You feel more rested. We talked about the third sort of strategy here, which is building your confidence by focusing what's within your control. The way that you're thinking, the way that you're feeling, and the way that you act or don't act. You want to be making choices that build your confidence as opposed to undermine them. And here, if you've got the choice to play small or play big, I would love for you to seriously consider playing big. The next point was who you surround yourself with matters. And so choose carefully. Are these people who are supportive, who want to help build you up, who want to help you build your confidence, who want to celebrate your success, who want to give you opportunities, Or are you surrounded by people who are toxic, who want to undermine you, who are going to resent you if you become more successful, who aren't going to give you opportunities? Maybe they're people who they've known you for years and they see you a certain way and they're not even doing it to be mean or unfriendly or unsupportive, but they see you as a baby lawyer and they will never see you as anything other than a baby lawyer. Maybe for that reason, it's time to move on, right? It's not anything against them. It's just that you're ready to step into the next chapter of your career. And so long as you're in that environment, it's going to be really hard. You're going to be working against the grain. I think this is the reason why a number of lawyers will lateral, right? To get into a new environment where they can propel themselves forward, in part because they're in a fresh environment where they can reset the tone. So that might be something that you need to do or want to do. And then finally, we talked about set points, right? As you're growing and you're having success, you're gaining skills and confidence, it might feel uncomfortable. And that's fine. Just notice that you may be hitting a set point, and instead of bringing yourself back to some other base level, like some level that is more comfortable through self-sabotage or through diminishing your accomplishments or whatever that looks like, we want to pause there. We want to collect ourselves and use that as a stepping stone to the next iteration, the next chapter, that next stage of growth. As a takeaway, what I'd love for you to think about as we wrap up today's episode are 3 questions to take with you this week. And the first of those questions is to, again, going back to where we started, where are there gaps in your professional work, in your maybe personal life? Where are there gaps? Where is a lack of confidence holding you back from making a decision? And what you might ask yourself more specifically could be, what are you tolerating? Are there things that are recurring and they're bothering you and you haven't done anything about them? And is a lack of confidence at the root of that? Maybe not, but maybe yes. And if that's the case, let's raise our awareness about that. So what gap is being created? Maybe it's something you're not pursuing because you don't feel confident. So what aren't you pursuing? And where do you feel stuck? Is there some place professionally, personally, where you are just not moving forward because you feel like, what if it doesn't work out? There's fear associated with it. Is that a lack of confidence or a sense of self-doubt? Is something there holding you back? And could this be your learning ground? Could that be your opportunity to take that growth mindset and say, there's this thing, I haven't been doing it, but I know that I want it. I know that I want my confidence to grow. And so this is going to be my test case. You could look at it like that. The second question is, what would you do if you felt 100% confident? So going back to that example, like, what are you tolerating, right? What are you not pursuing? Where are you stuck? If you 100% felt like the outcome that you wanted would be the outcome that you would get, what would you do? What would you choose to do? What would be different? What steps would you be taking? How would you be feeling? How would you be thinking, right? We want to step into that version of you, right? And once you know what that looks like, then you can create a pathway there. So that's the second question. If you felt 100% confident, if you were able to close that gap, what would you be doing? And then finally, moving into action, what is one step you can take, whether it's today, whether it's this week, toward confidence, right? If you find throughout your day, and chances are you're going to have a chance to exercise this today, certainly sometime this week, is you may find yourself with a fork in the road. There's a choice that you need to make. Maybe it's an invitation to speak at an event. Maybe it's a client event you're thinking about throwing. Maybe it's a file that you're thinking of taking on. Maybe it's a difficult conversation with a colleague or a client or opposing counsel. Maybe it's a court application. It could be anything, right? Where that twinge of like, ooh, I don't know if I should do it, right? Maybe it's raising your hand in a meeting. Maybe it's disagreeing or raising a different opinion where you might otherwise have stayed quiet. Where is one fork in the road this week where you can either choose to play big or play small? I would love for you to play big. Play big. That is your kind of invitation for the week. So again, just recapping those 3 questions is, where's the gap? Where is the gap that's being created through a lack of confidence? Number 2, what would you do? What would life look like? Who would you be if you felt 100% confident about the outcome and your ability to create it? And then finally, what is one step you can take this week? One thing, one decision you can make this week where you're stepping toward greater confidence as opposed to shying away from it. So that, my friend, is what I have to share with you today. And I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to reconnecting again next week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.